We're here at the Magistrates Court in Hobart, Tasmania, for day 2 of the inquest into Jari Wise's death. Jari Wise died after he was hit by a car just after 1:10 in the morning on Saturday the 29th of February 2020. Jari's girlfriend, Melissa Oates, was driving the car at the time. She was sentenced to 14 months jail, 6 months suspended, on the basis she was not legally responsible for his death. The I Catch Killers podcast was a fresh start for me, as I left policing behind and started a new life. Over the years, we've laughed together, cried, and shared some powerful moments. Welcome to I Catch Killers.
Now, who will we be hearing from today?
Well, the first witness on the list is Melissa Oates. She was the driver of the vehicle that struck Jari, and the second witness is Jari's mother, so it's going to be an interesting day in court.
And quite an emotional day probably as well.
I would imagine it's going to be very emotional, especially for Jari's mother's Faith.
And we saw his mum just before entering court. How did she seem?
Yeah, I've got to say, and when we're just standing here, Faith walked past and we had a brief chat, and she seemed very positive. And when I queried her about what's with the spring in your step, she said that she felt like she'd been vindicated just by what happened yesterday at court, where people had got to see and make their own assessment of the witnesses who were called to give evidence into the inquest into the death of her son.
She seems in quite high spirits for someone who's going to be sitting in the witness box later today, doesn't she?
Yeah, and she's going to, and she acknowledged that it's going to be emotional for when she gets in there. But you've got to understand, this is a woman that's been fighting for 4 years to be heard. I saw a distinct change in her. It felt like the pressure was off, that people were actually listening and had the opportunity to hear what she'd been saying for so long.
Seemed a bit lighter today, didn't she? Like the weight had been lifted off partially.
Yeah, and I can fully understand that. She's been fighting town hall literally and pushing up against the stream, and yesterday it was what she had been saying, and I know because she said it to me time and time again, was displayed in the court.
How are you feeling about what's ahead today?
I'm very curious about what's going to happen. I like seeing how the legal system, regardless of what jurisdiction, sorts out problems, and I see this particular one as a curious issue that needs to be addressed, so I'll be very interested how it plays out.
Yeah, shall we head into court?
Yeah, I think we should get in there. While we're sitting here through the inquest, let's hear from Amber Wilson. Amber's a crime reporter for the Mercury newspaper, one of Tasmania's leading papers, which is owned by News Corp. We're going to hear from Amber about Jari's law and how it could change legislation, so I think this is going to be interesting. I'm standing here out the front of Hobart Magistrates Court, and I'm here with Amber Wilson, a journalist with the Mercury, who's been covering this case for, I think since the start, so over 4 years. So, Amber?
It's coming up 4 years now, actually, Gary. Yeah, so I'd only just started with the Mercury when this incident happened, this tragedy occurred. And it was an awful case. I was working on a Sunday. I think it was a Saturday that Jari died.
Yeah.
And we got into the office and heard that overnight there'd been someone lying in front of Huonville High School, and pretty quickly it turned out that person was deceased. Just an awful story. And as the weeks rolled on, things got more complex because it became apparent that the person who'd run Jari over was not going to be charged with any causing death crime. So we've got a number of causing death crimes in Tasmania, which are different to the ones you'd find interstate. So there's dangerous driving causing death, there's negligent driving causing death, there's manslaughter. There's a few different types of death causing charges. And Melissa Oates, Jari's on and off again girlfriend, wasn't charged with any of these. And it actually took some time before her case actually got to the Magistrates Court, and by that time we discovered that she'd only been charged with dangerous driving, which was the indictable offence, and there were some other summary charges as well that she'd been charged with.
So you were reporting it. When did you start to get a sense that there was something more to look at in this particular story? That wasn't, well, when I say it wasn't, the courts have ruled, and Melissa Oates has pleaded guilty to the charges, so that's been dealt with from the criminal court. But here we are at an inquest, 4 years down the track. And to get this matter to inquest has been a long, hard battle that I believe you've followed.
So, yes, it's a little bit hard to say whether or not there is something to look at, because as you've said, the courts have the Director of Public Prosecutions determined that there was only a case for dangerous driving, and the courts have convicted and sentenced on that basis. However, pretty quickly, and I'm talking about from that day, which was, as I said, it was a Sunday I was working, which would have been the 30th of February 2020, we were wondering, we'd heard from the community there was concern about what Melissa Oates was going to be charged with, and this reached fever pitch over the coming year, really. And the person who was really spearheading that was Jari's mum, Faith Tkalac. And when Melissa was sentenced for dangerous driving, not dangerous driving causing death in the Supreme Court, Faith told us it felt like a kick in the face.
Yeah. I first came in contact with Faith. She was sitting on the steps of your Attorney General's office, and she wasn't going to leave until she came out and spoke to her. So she's a fairly determined lady. I always think justice, and we're not talking this specific case, but justice should be open to everyone. It shouldn't just be available to certain people. Why do you think Faith has had to fight so hard to get something that other people might assume is just what the system would do for them?
There's a few different avenues to go down there with your question. So the first thing, we do have problems with transparency in Tasmania. We've historically had problems with transparency back to our convict colonial origins. We're definitely a state known for keeping secrets. Our political donation disclosure laws have traditionally been dismally woeful. Access to court documents by the media have been really not what they are interstate. So we have had a lot of troubles with having open justice in the same way that Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane have open justice. Justice just isn't as open in Tasmania.
And that's a cause of concern, isn't it?
It is a cause of concern. In saying that, we need to be careful with how we describe this particular case. And certainly the coroner deemed that the Jari Wise case didn't need to have a coronial investigation. The Supreme Court of Tasmania deemed that there was no need for a coronial investigation. And it was only after what we would describe as an extraordinary intervention by Elise Archer, our then Attorney General, that an inquest was compelled. So we, as a member of the media, we're certainly not criticising the actions of the Coroner's Court and the Supreme Court of Tasmania in making those decisions, that they have the judicial option of holding inquests or not, and make those decisions all the time. However, in this case, the community expectations were just so out of line with what actually happened in the courts. I don't know what the answer to that is, but for Jari's mum, the answer was to never give up. And I think this was one of those cases of just pure motherly love that's so passionate and so undying that you'll do anything to protect your child, even when your child has passed on, which I think is so incredibly beautiful. So Faith held protests, she held rallies, she camped outside politicians' offices. This case just went on and on and on till finally something happened. And when the Attorney General intervened, that had never happened before in Tasmanian history as far as we know.
Well, and intervened into the fact that Jari's law...
Certainly Jari's law, what was currently before Parliament in whatever form it's in, which was drafted by Faith's lawyer, Fabiano Cangalosi, who you saw today in action. So yes, that is a law which, if it is passed, it will compel an inquest in circumstances where a death may have occurred through an action of a domestic partner. So Jari's law and the meaning of Jari's law changed, I guess, over time. So when this case first happened, it got definitely caught up with some of the people who would be described as men's rights activists. which is a very, very controversial area of political discourse, as we both know.
Yeah.
And some of those areas of discussion and debate may be valid, and some of them might not be valid. The law that Faith originally wanted to get going was to have a mandatory sentence for women who make false allegations of violence against their partners, which would probably be really, really difficult to police and enforce.
Yeah, very much.
And also is caught up in all this hairball of men's right activism and controversy. Yeah. So it was really a good move to change the meaning of Jari's law to something that could have a real world outcome and that could be helpful and practical in a real world sense.
And my understanding then that the law, should it come in, is going to have a situation where Faith has had to campaign to get an inquest. In circumstances, if it repeated itself, it would be a natural course of events that there would be an inquest held into Jari's death.
Yeah, which is fantastic.
And I think because this is where people sometimes misunderstand that the criminal courts are very narrow focus. And with Melissa being charged with those specific offences, it wasn't an inquiry into Jari's death. It was simply about the offences that she's alleged to have committed. She ended up pleading guilty and the matter's finalised. But there you've got Jari's family sitting there with no outcome on, or no understanding of what. Well, if Melissa didn't cause Jari's death, who did? What are the circumstances that played a part of it? So I can understand the need for the campaign.
And it's that interminable grief, isn't it? It's that sense of not being able to find an answer. It's like when somebody's loved one dies, especially one of their children, and they can't find the body, and the murderer won't give up the location of the body. Those parents are just left with the most excruciating pain and incompleteness until they die too. Yeah. It's just not fair for people. So anything the justice system can do to help bring about a sense of completion and having all of the avenues checked off is a really good thing for families who go through so much when one of their loved ones dies.
Most definitely. You sat through the inquest. What was your takeaway from day one?
We had two witnesses who were either arrested or warned by the coroner. So the first witness just didn't show up, and we later found out that she got taken into custody.
A warrant was issued.
A warrant was issued for her arrest. The cops went and arrested her. Look, she hasn't shown up, and the coroner did say that he's unlikely to compel her to give evidence. Mind you, we had a bit of a legal argument at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's going to be considered overnight, I think.
Yeah, she'd indeed be compelled, and even if that means giving evidence from a remote location via video link. And then we had what could be described as a highly belligerent and emotional witness who refused to give answers, who swore like a sailor. And
well, I hate to say it, but this is my first impression of the courts in Tasmania, and that was the first witness I've seen. I have not seen, in all the times I've spent in court, whether it be a criminal or a coronial inquest, I've never seen a witness behave in that manner. That was at the extreme for uncooperative witness. Yeah, it must be hard. We're standing here, and it sort of shocked me, but it must be hard for the family and friends or anyone that's there for an inquest, such a serious matter, seeing a witness so uncooperative.
She sure was, but honestly, that's far from the most extreme situation we've seen at this court related to this matter.
Yeah.
There were earlier court appearances at the Hobart Magistrates Court where we've had close to what you would describe as a riot. Things have gotten hectic.
Okay,
before.
well that might explain that one particular portion here, that the inquest was suspended only momentarily until the security guard came back in. The coroner said that I'm going to leave the bench until security's here. So that I didn't quite understand what was going on there, but that might explain it.
And the second takeaway was what exactly happened that night, because we've got a bit of clashing evidence here. So we've got evidence that Jari was standing front on to Melissa's vehicle on the roadway. So we have got some evidence there that he might have actually been standing in front of the car. We've also got evidence to suggest that perhaps there wasn't a history of Jari ever stepping out in front of cars before, which has always been the clincher in this case. But we've now got one witness who said, oh, actually, I never said that. The time that I saw Melissa nearly hit Jari, he actually jumped away from the car. And we did have a lawyer today who was really nailing in on calling out a witness for potentially lying, or what the word he used was inventing a story of Jari jumping in front of her car a few months before he died.
Yeah.
So the evidence there is really conflicting. I think the jury's still out.
Well, you said it very succinctly there, but the cornerstone of a lot of the things that have happened in this particular matter have been on the basis that Jari had this predisposition for jumping out in front of Melissa's car, which changes a lot of things.
It changes a lot of things, doesn't it? And as you said, that was a credible witness. We had someone who was measured in the witness box. We had someone who wasn't emotionally volatile or vitriolic. We had someone who said, no, actually, I'm not sure how that happened. I was really tired. I hadn't slept. It was a huge night. I know I signed that witness statement, but that's not what I meant. I didn't think that. I didn't see that. I didn't see Jari jumping in front of Melissa's car. In fact, I saw him jumping away.
Jumping away. And I'd further add to that, because it got me very interested, that Melissa was driving towards Jari, and this other witness was in the car and saw Jari before Melissa saw it and had to warn Melissa that Jari's there, and then she screams and Jari jumps out of the way and hits his knee. Completely different perspective on what the statutory declaration said.
I think the coroner's going to have a tough job with this one. It's going to be really hard to come to a final determination on what the circumstances were that night.
Yeah, to see all the people out the front of the court supporting Faith and what's happened to Jari. I spoke to Faith about it, and she said, look, these people have been everywhere and they're giving me a lot of strength, and some of the people I don't even know, and they're out here with the signs and stickers for justice for Jari, that type of thing. Is that something that's been bubbling along with this matter? The
Justice for Jari crew have turned up, I think, to every single hearing over the past 4 years. They've been tireless. They've been here the whole time. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Look, thank you very much. Obviously, I think you'd be very curious the way this is going to go at the end. But thanks for your time and your interest in this story. It's a fascinating one. Not a worry. Thanks, Gary. Cheers. While we were on a break during the court proceedings, we caught up with Jari's mum, Faith Tkalac. Okay, we're standing out the front of Hobart Magistrates Court, and it's in the afternoon, so it went for a day and a half, basically, a day and 3/4. I was watching you in court. It's pretty harrowing experience hearing about the death of your child.
Yeah, it is. I feel almost conditioned to it. I don't know if that's appropriate wording, but I know that it really gets to me when, for instance, I saw the file on the ground that says inquest into the death of Jari Elliott Ernest Wise, and I was also very aware that I had my daughter in there this afternoon, so I had to make sure she was out of the room at certain times. Yeah, I noticed when the accident investigation police officer, the senior constable, was giving evidence and showing about to show photos that you looked over and asked your daughter to maybe a good time to leave. Get out, yeah. So that's just the protection. Protection, yeah. She does not need to see that. Yeah, not at all. It's hard. Faith, you're in the court the whole time while the evidence was being heard and what was said in the court. How do you feel? I don't know if it's going to wear off, but at this point I'm feeling really happy, which is I've never felt like this when I've come out of any sort of court proceeding regarding Jari's death. So that's new. Honestly, I am really happy, which is something that I don't know if it's just a high coming out of the court now, but I actually feel really happy I actually really am happy. I don't know. I have nothing else I can really say. Yeah. It's just something that I wanted for so long. I've been bashing my head against a brick wall for nearly 4 years, and it's happened.
Not getting down to the specifics, do you feel that Jari's had his day in court, so
Absolutely.
to speak?
Yes, I do. And I think that's where the happiness is coming from. Finally, where with like Justice for Jari, it's actually turned into a campaign, which I hate that. I don't like that it's had to turn into, quote unquote something. But yeah, Justice for Jari, today finally it's happened. This is what should have happened years ago.
Talk about Jari not being forgotten. I know this here, and it must hearten you that there's a large group of people out the front of the courthouse with signs up.
Yeah, and I don't even know a lot of them,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. So I don't think that I can leave the house and go anywhere without someone just giving me a pat on the shoulder or a smile, or this support has been amazing.
Yeah.
It sounds so incredibly cringe, but it's just... Or even sometimes I'll be driving along in the car, and that's when I have my cries, when I'm by myself in the car, and there'll be a Jari sticker, and they pop up all over the place.
That must hearten you.
Whole of Tassie's behind us, mate.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
Well, just as we're standing here talking out the front of the court, a group of, I'll call them supporters of Jari's, have just walked past and placed, looks like a wreath.
Yep. They're, Jari would have a laugh, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
Jari would have a bit of a laugh about that. Bloody hippies. But no, bless their cotton socks.
Speaking of, there goes another group with all the signs.
All the banners. Yeah. Every time they feel like I need someone, they're there.
Yeah.
I don't even know these people's names.
Now you were down to give evidence at the inquest today.
Yeah.
You chose not to. Can you explain why?
I feel like we've been left in a really good position, and that what the coroner himself heard from the witnesses was just perfect.
Where to from now?
Well, usually I'll be having a beer, but in preparation for this inquest, I actually gave up drinking about 5 months ago, just because I knew this was going to be huge.
You had to be on your game.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go home, watch a bit of TV, but now I might start to actually grieve because I've been fighting. So now I think the fight's over. Perhaps that will come. I don't know if I can do that. Well, if Jari was here, I'd ring him now and say, well, when you finish work, mate, let's have a six-pack, He's a mate. I miss that he's not there for his brother and sisters. Mostly. Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah.
I thank you for reaching out, and it means a lot, and let's see what happens from here.
Yeah.
Okay,
All
good
right.
stuff.
Thank you.
Thanks. Cheers.
Thanks, mate.
Really happy for you.
Cheers.
So we've just left the court after day 2 of the inquest, which was the final day of the inquest into Jari Wise's death. We're back here at the hotel lobby, and it was a bit of an interesting start to the day today, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it was an interesting start. I think Melissa Oates, a key witness in the matter, obviously, was late for court, and that wasn't well received by the magistrate, who made some comments to that effect, that it was disrespectful to the court. He adjourned the court till 10:30, and to give time for Melissa to make her appearance by a video link.
The coroner told the court that it simply wasn't good enough that she had arrived late, and it was disrespectful to the court. He said that it was disrespectful also to the family that was there today.
And I think the coroner was right in what he said.
When Melissa did finally appear via video link, she was questioned by her counsel, Philippa Morgan, and the court heard that she's a mother of 4, one of those including her daughter, which she shared with Jari, that their relationship began in 2015, and the court heard that Oates lived a normal life with Jari, that they did activities on the weekend with the kids, they drank, but when they drank, that was when arguments happened, and importantly, there was an argument before the night of the incident.
Yeah, I think she made the comment, when we get to the top shelf, that's generally where arguments occur.
And she meant high alcohol spirits.
Yeah, that was clarified in the court.
So the court heard today that Melissa and Jari had last-minute plans to go to Jessica Hosking's house on the evening of the 28th of February 2020. We didn't hear from Jessica Hoskins yesterday, but she was called to be a witness. The court heard that Melissa had a disagreement with Jari that night. What did you make of that?
The court, the way it was relayed from Melissa in evidence was that it was a minor disagreement. There was damage done to the car, then they made up. But later on, during cross-examination and when evidence was presented to the court, it became clear the argument was more significant, and it was in fact at the time that Jari left the premises, that was when the argument was at its highest.
The court heard that Jari left to go see his friend, which was a short distance away, and then some moments later Melissa left because she got hungry, so she went for a drive to the local Caltex to pick up some food.
There was also evidence presented to the court that people at the house were trying to dissuade Melissa from going out and even offering to cook for her and not go out. They were trying to dissuade her from driving the car.
Because she'd been drinking a substantial amount and she got behind the wheel. And she wasn't wearing her glasses, the court heard as well.
Yeah. So the court was informed that Melissa went to not only get some food, but to find Jari, pick him up, take him home, and she also informed the court that arrangements were made for her kids to be looked after. There was her two youngest children were at the Hoskins place at the time of the argument. Her older children were with her father, their grandfather.
Yeah.
Now, when she left the premises, the court was informed of all the communications between. The call charge records were presented to the court in the form of a table when Melissa was in the witness box being cross-examination. There was numerous calls to and from Melissa, whether it was from Melissa's phone to Jari or Jari to Melissa, and some text messages exchanged, which clearly showed there was communication between the two parties after Jari had left the party and when Melissa had left the party.
But Oates told the court that she didn't remember what those phone calls were about, and she also didn't remember receiving a text message that said, "Please go back," which was sent from Jari.
That text message was at 1:10 a.m. The court was informed, which is only a couple of minutes before the impact, and that's Jari saying to her, "Please go back." Now, the line of questioning, the cross-examination that was put to her by the solicitor representing Jari's family was that if she's looking for Jari, the natural flow of the conversation would be that Jari tell her where he is. Melissa, in her answers, which were quite frequent, that I don't remember, I can't recall, that type of thing, or vague in her answers, couldn't recall what the conversations were about. It was put to her significantly in cross-examination that, well, what was the purpose of the calls, and she said she couldn't remember. But what was presented to the court, that there was communication between Jari and Melissa leading up to the collision.
That brings us to the moment where Melissa had the collision, but she told the court she didn't know what she hit. She wasn't sure whether Jari had thrown something at the car or whether it had been an animal that jumped out in front of her. So during court today, Melissa was asked what she remembered about the collision, and she didn't remember much about it at all, did she?
Yeah, no, she didn't.
And Melissa told the court today that she heard a bang and something hard had hit her car. She didn't know what it was at the time, and that's when she drove straight back to Jessica's house.
It was further explored about the damage to the vehicle later on, and damage to the windscreen in particular, and the court it was requested in cross-examination that a photo be shown to Melissa of the damage to the car. Melissa had indicated to the court that she didn't see the car that night, she didn't want to see the car, and was reluctant to even look at the photo. There was an objection by the solicitor representing Melissa about what the relevance of that photo being shown. The case was argued, there was some legal argy-bargy about the relevance of it, and the coroner decided that it was appropriate that the photo be shown. The photo was then shown to Melissa, and she acknowledged there was significant damage to the vehicle, including the windscreen.
A note said in court today that she didn't initially remember the damage that was caused, but the photo jogged her memory.
Yes.
What did she say about what happened after the collision?
From what the court has been informed, and I think accepted and corroborated by Melissa herself in the evidence, that she didn't brake, she just continued on, and she went back to the place where Jessica Hoskins was. She went straight back there. From memory, and I think the court was informed of this, it was about 5 minutes away.
Mm. And the court heard today as well evidence from 2 statutory declarations, which included statements from neighbours who heard Melissa speaking to Hoskins when she got back to the house. What was it that they said?
And this was read verbatim from the stat decks that the neighbours and people who were at the premises, in the vicinity of the premises, heard Melissa say when she got back to Hoskins' place shortly after the collision. Look at my car. Look at my fucking car. Look at what he's done to my car. He's fucked my car. Now, that was put to her. Now, in response to that, and these were statements or extracts from stat decks that were read out to the court.
However, when the lawyers asked Melissa if these were her words, she replied no, and then when she was further questioned, she said, "It's not true."
Oates was asked what she felt when she heard the noise. Oates informed the court, "I didn't know if Jari had been along there and thrown something at my car or an animal. I just panicked and went back to Jessica's." And when she says Jessica's, she's talking about Jessica Hoskins, where she had come from. And then she further informed the court, "I don't remember. I'm pretty sure Jessica was on the doorstep. I don't remember words said between us. We got in the car and drove up to Wilmot Road." So they went back to where this collision occurred. And she informed the court, "We'd seen stuff on the road, we hopped out of the car, and that's when we seen Jari."
Mm.
Today, the court also heard Melissa being questioned about a number of incidents, including an incident between her and Jari that occurred a month before the collision, as well as a previous collision they were both involved in 8 or 9 years ago, in which a vehicle being driven by Melissa struck Jari. The court also heard about an incident where Melissa was seen chasing Jari in a car on another occasion. The inquest concluded today after 2 days of hearing evidence. The coroner said in court that he'll be looking at the evidence in relation to movements of the deceased on the road, what happened at or after 1:10 a.m. on Wilmot Road. We've heard from Faith, Jari's mother. We heard from Amber Wilson, a journalist who's been covering this matter from the outset. And the only person we've yet to hear from is the coroner. Now it's time to wait for the coroner to hand down his findings.